Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, a show about politics and the news. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
I forgot what we normally do. And we are 4/6 of Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. You know what it is. Friend of the show and best-selling author Jack Heath gave me some feedback about the show and about things we could do differently. And one of the things that he mentioned was that it's a show about, because you're not a comedy show about the news, you're like a politics show. That's funny. I was like, oh, fuck. He's right.
It's only taken us 15
years
to realize that.
15
I mean, it's great
years.
that you're listening to feedback because I don't. So
famously
so. Someone has to be plugged into the wider world.
Yeah, incredibly unlikable is how I've heard you described. So
yeah, exactly. This is actually just my 1 hour of therapy that I do every week. I don't actually, understand what I'm saying half the time, but it is therapy. By the end of it, I feel better. So
you should still go to therapy. Yeah.
What?
No, 100%. You should still go to therapy. It's convenient though, because it's also my therapy as well. So we're just therapizing past each other, and then no one has to pay anything. So bad for GDP. Great for us not having to spend any money on meds. Men will start a podcast. Men will do literally anything rather than go to therapy. Speaking of men who need to go to therapy, Post-Dutton. You may have heard Peter Dutton lost the election last week. We did a live election spanktacular where we live streamed some of the election coverage, and we edited that down and released that as an episode, which was actually like fairly listenable. I thought it was like 3 hours of live streaming, and I sort of cut it down to an hour and a half.
Oh, it was good. You cut it well. I was happy with that.
It kind of made sense. There was the sort of the victory speeches and like the key moments of the night were all in there, and we didn't talk over them too much, which was good.
Yeah.
So it worked out pretty good.
It's interesting you described it as that Peter Dutton lost the election as opposed to Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party winning the election, despite it being a record sort of
Anthony
majority.
Albanese, luckiest boy in Canberra, like really.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, so I wrote an article about this. So I've started a Substack, me and every other prick on the internet with a keyboard.
What is Substack, by the way? I know I've accessed it and I've looked at it, but for the listener, describe what a Substack is.
So Substack is essentially it's almost like a blogging platform, I guess you would call it. It's it is both a blogging platform as well as like an email mailing list service. So kind of like both of those services at once. And the way the services are set up, it's kind of like integrated in such a way as you can charge people for access to your content if you so desired. So you can run a free newsletter /blog, and or you can also have like, particular blog posts that are only for paid subscribers and things like that. Podcasting. It's like this whole new media ecosystem is kind of predicated on this, sort of Patreon Substack model.
Subscriber model,
right? And so, me and every other idiot on the internet has started a Substack. And
there's some good content up there, George. I mean, as someone who, you've been posting it on our website as well.
Yeah,
but,
well,
so I also
you can get it. Get it where you get it. But there's why did I mention the Substack? How do we get here? What am I doing?
You're talking about Substack. You've been talking and writing an article recently about the election and the fallout from it.
Yeah, and I'll link it in the show notes. But talking about how the Liberal Party was so thoroughly trounced. But yeah, you're right. I mean, certainly Labor did run a strong campaign, and this is something I discuss in one of my articles, which I'll link in the show notes. And there were things that were good about Labor's campaign, their social media strategy and all this sort of stuff, which I talk about. But I mean, really, the things that allowed the Liberals to get smashed this time around really had to do with things that were not, Labor Party actions necessarily. So the argument I make is that
Liberals dug their own grave.
Say again?
The Liberals dug their own grave.
And
then filled it in with themselves.
The Liberals dug a mass grave in preparation for what was coming. So so obviously Dutton was like thoroughly unlikable. He went into the election day with like a 16-point differential against Anthony Albanese on a preferred prime minister basis. Like, people did not like Dutton. They came with a raft of like pretty shitty policies. They were uncosted. they released their costings 2 days before the election, and they were all dog shit. Like me and fucking no one else went through the actual costings and were like, hey, so this doesn't actually make sense with what you guys are claiming, like saying, that they were going to cut 41,000 public service sector employees, but then saying there weren't going to be cuts, they were going to be natural attrition, but then they're banking like $1.7 billion worth of savings from that policy in year one when you look at the costing. So it's like, oh, that's a lot of people naturally attriting the fuck out of themselves. Like, so they ran a shitty campaign. Dutton was shooting a lot from the hip. He was like preternaturally like unlikable. And there's also these demographic factors as well. Like millennials are a notoriously progressive generation compared to other generations. We're not getting more conservative over time, which is what normally happens. Dutton had a massive women problem. Women tend to vote overwhelmingly for the coalition. And again, they announced all these unpopular policies like killing working from home and like working
slashing. Yeah.
It just
the nuclear stuff was a balls up. Like
the nuclear stuff was just a total fiasco from start to finish.
And the thing is, like, Australian people can smell the bullshit. Like that at the end of the day.
The bullshit was so strong that even the Australian public smelled it.
And this is the thing, is that we're not seeing like the Green vote and the independent vote like necessarily collapse. What we're seeing is Liberal voters go, fuck this, and vote Labor. And
you say that, but also like the Greens have lost seats as well. There's at least 2 seats that lost to Labor in this last election. So the Liberals were losing
significantly
seats.
Lost that much though. Like compared
in terms of their vote share, yes, but in terms of their seats, they're obviously not doing well. Adam Bandt lost his seat. Max Chandler Mayher lost his seat. Like the leadership of the Greens has been pretty well decimated at this point.
But that's just liberal voters going, I don't want to vote Liberal anymore, and voting Labor, and then obviously the Greens, who were previously in those seats in Brisbane, were picking up the difference, right? In this case here, because Liberal voters jump ship, it's not enough.
Didn't matter.
Obviously, Adam Bandt's an interesting one actually, because he was 15 years, right?
Yeah.
So the Brisbane stuff, I'm kind of like, well, they only had it for a term, so it's not like, not crazy. You can sort of deduce that down pretty easily. But the Adam Bandt one is interesting because it's like 15 years. He had it it was a reasonably safe seat. You would have thought,
progressive area, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it represents the city of represented the city of Melbourne, which inner city Melbourne is like, peak lefty wanker, right?
Yeah.
That's the stereotypical, lefty enclave, right?
Yeah, and so that one going to Labor was interesting. I was kind of shocked about that one.
There's been a lot of commentary about this. Obviously, we're not going to know until all of the final results are released and we can start getting more detailed counts from different ballot boxes and start doing, get some data analysis going. But it does seem like people, there were a couple of instances in this last cycle of government where, the Greens teamed up with the coalition to block initiatives. I think that really pissed some people off.
Yeah.
I think
pissed me off.
Yeah. So, and I think people felt like, the kind of the threat of Dutton and the Trump effect was enough to scare them into like sort of moving maybe towards where the political consensus is. It's like, well, we don't want a Labor minority government with the Greens. We want a strong Labor majority in order to be, and that's exactly what they've got. They've got 92 seats at the moment. Like, it can only be described as a thumping victory. Like,
with a bunch more that are likely as well. Keep in mind, I think it was Tony Abbott's. I've got to remember Tony Abbott's majority was, I think that was 90 seats. Maybe it was 96. But like they're very close to that now, if not surpassing it. What was interesting at the Greens campaign, right, is that one of their big messaging things that they had on all over the social media, whatever else, was keep Dutton out. That's what Adam Bandt kept saying, keep Dutton out. And it's like, I think that campaign was that slogan actually bit them in the ass a little bit.
Well, probably helped Labor more than it helped them in some instances. I see what you mean.
Like what rather than campaigning on, I mean, they did campaign on some policy ideas. They did have them, but like the thing that I remember from their campaign was the keep Dutton out. In fact, that is what Adam Bandt was claiming. At his victory speech was, we kept Dutton out. Yay, we won.
We won. Kind of. But you don't remember the giant toothbrush he was still slinging around talking about put dental into Medicare? That sticks out to me.
Anyway, maybe that's me cherry picking the messaging. But
There was some analysis saying that like, walking around saying that they were the party of renters, like isolated homeowners and made them not want to vote for them. I was like, yeah, I don't. That smells like bullshit to me. I don't think that's real. Like, if you're a homeowner, and you're like relatively comfortable and not that leftist, like you probably weren't voting Greens in the first place. Like,
I think, look, this is my hot take. This is my gut. This
Get
is
ready.
the powers of observation of Adam Dream without any facts to back them up.
Hey, Adam, think we're on a podcast. It's perfect.
Perfect.
Here's a white guy with feelings and no facts. Here we go.
Let's go. You look at sort of what happened. One of the things I couldn't wrap my head around was like, how did Dutton go from like the success of The Voice, right, to being and having pretty good polling like 6 months ago, to just like getting the shit kicked out of him? Like, how did that transition happen?
So again, I talk about it. Okay, you're offering analysis. Go ahead.
My theory is just that, very simply, Australian people don't like change. They don't like they don't like the possibility of instability.
Yes.
They want things just to continue with some certainty.
Yeah, I agree.
That goes for The Voice. That goes for the whole Rudd Gillard thing years ago. Yeah. And I think it's true in this election that, they saw some of the Trump shit. They saw some of the stuff that Dutton was saying and the inconsistencies in his campaign, and they smelt the bullshit and they went, I don't want to risk it. We just want to, we may not love Albanese. Like, he may be our second or third preference, but like, we're not putting Liberals number one.
So it's interesting you say that, because I basically wrote an article to that effect the other day. So thanks for getting ahead of so just spoiling the punchline on that one. But
it's all right. People have to read the article to
read the article to get the good stuff. It's free. Please join. So the title of the article is "Voters Didn't Reject Dutton Because of His Division; They Rejected His Chaos." I saw a lot of the stuff, on social media and online, people going, "Yeah, Australia has risen above the fray and rejected division. The culture wars are over. Peter Dutton's politics is toxic and disgusting." I was like, he was winning in February. Like, it's not like his toxic culture war stuff was great 9 weeks ago. So I don't think that was the issue. It was the chaos. They rejected his particular brand of chaos as the voters got more exposure to Dutton during the course of the election campaign. And they saw this weird shit about nuclear, and like, we are doing working from home and we're not doing working from home, and we are firing people, but when we're not firing people, it's natural attrition. Like, all of these, backflips on Indonesia, whether they thought the Russians were going to put a base in Indonesia, and they are, and now they're not. And they just saw him and all this Trump stuff about, we're going to have a Doge, we're going to make Australia great again. People are looking at all of that chaos and going, nah. Anthony Albanese is boring, but at least I don't need to think about politics when he's in charge. So,
and that's the thing, is that like, that's the thing. He's like, and this, we were saying like, 6 months ago, from even like, as you said, 9 weeks ago, they need to get out of this small target mindset and start swinging. But
Labor does.
Honestly, honestly, I think the small target thing kind of worked a little bit.
They definitely gave Dutton enough rope to hang himself with, for sure. Like, he certainly didn't. He proved to be as inept of a campaigner as he is a politician, right? And they didn't have the policy chops. Like, something that this article talks about, how Peter Dutton's Wile Coyote campaign flew off the cliff. Talks a lot about just how poorly organized the campaign was. And I hate these stories. I call them the "then why didn't you say anything then" stories, because it's like, if you had, like, they're talking about anecdotes like going back a year, the journalists in this article. So it's like,
it's a lot of background, like they
all of this shit on background. I don't know if it's just as soon as the election, as soon as Dutton loses the election, every donor, every fucking political operative is happy to get on the phone and jawbone with the ABC. But it really seemed to me like they had a lot of information about the inner workings of the Dutton campaign, and only once he's spent as a political force, did they then feel comfortable to turn around and actually tell the Australian public about it. They're like, everyone knew who was campaigning in this particular seat, knew that they didn't want to put up corflutes with Peter Dutton. There was 600 corflutes with Peter Dutton's face on it, and they didn't want to put him up because he was politically toxic, and everyone knew, and he was always going to get thumped. And it's like, well, no, but everyone didn't know, because he was winning 9 weeks ago. So it's like, it's not like it was inevitable, and there was this, everyone knew that the campaign was shambolic. Like, the campaign was shambolic, and clearly journalists knew that it was shambolic and had evidence and information about it. They just decided not to release it to the public because what if he becomes prime minister? I need my yummy access journalism. I need to be able to get in. I don't want to have pissed off the man who's about to become the prime minister. And I think a lot of the mainstream media wanted to play it as like, oh, well, we've got to make out like it's a horse race. We've got to make out like it's close and the polls are narrowing and it's a tight horse race and you've got to stay tuned to Channel 9. Make sure you buy all the fucking Colgate you can. Like, because otherwise who's going to sell clicks if they don't, right? So I think it was...
It's interesting.
Yeah, I really got the impression that the mainstream media kind of really let us down with regards to reporting on the Dutton campaign, especially given the way that this article sort of lays it all out. Like, oh, and all of a sudden... like day 2 after his election loss, we've got a comprehensive timeline of all the fuck ups of the campaign. It's like, why didn't I hear about this a week ago? Like, where were you, ABC? It's so weird.
I mean, that they were reporting on stuff as it happened. Dutton said this, and now he's doing
only
this.
public statements and things like that he's putting out there in public. This is like behind the scenes stuff, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how much of these quotes and the backgrounding and the liberal, an unnamed liberal insider said this, and it's like, okay, right.
Oh, the bravest fucking liberal insiders. Now that the guy's gone down like a sack of shit, they're just like, oh, you know what? I've found my courage. It's like, have you, buddy? Have you just?
So there's some interesting anecdotes, like Peter Dutton's chief of staff called this big meeting. Alex Dalglish, if I pronounced that correctly. Called all the shadow cabinet in for a big important meeting, like at a moment's notice. Like come in with something really important
Massive
to tell
announcement.
you. And everyone was like, in the Liberal Party was like freaking out. And he's like, his big thing at the end of the meeting was, do you know, in a year the election will be over? And apparently, that was just a running joke in liberal circles for.
Well, they were thinking at that point the election was going to be called by August, so it just showed that they had this idea that they had at least a year's worth of runway when an election could have been called any time, and they clearly just weren't prepared for it. I think that was the point of the anecdote. Was like he's going, "Oh, it's going to be over in a year," and they're like, "Bro, it'll be over next quarter. Like, what are you talking about?"
The other interesting thing was that there were a lot of
the bad polls. The polls were so bad. The bad polling. Everything had to get run up through HQ. Anytime they released a video, it had to go through the central headquarters of the Liberal Party before it was released, and so they weren't agile. Whereas Labor was turning around memes day off.
Straight up.
Something would happen in the news, and they would turn around a meme about it and then push it out same day. Agility was definitely the Labor campaign was good. It wasn't spectacular. It was just a good, solid campaign, and they embraced the memes and they did a few things, new, and they spent a lot of money on targeted digital video and all that sort of stuff. It was a good campaign. But the Liberal Party just ran a shambolic shit show of a campaign, and so against that, it looks really, it looks really bad.
When they, on that election recording, I'm not sure if it ended up making it into the actual recording, but in the live stream, I noted, I was like, I don't know, understand. I said it's probably the worst political campaign I've ever seen. And I was like, I don't know how, and I said, I don't know how they could have gotten it this bad. And this article, which we'll post in the show notes, does go into some of the reasons as to why it was so bad. And a key example, right? It wasn't actually part of the election campaign. It was before that. It was the budget reply speech, right? We had the last minute budget because of the cyclone. Apparently, they were still arguing over the wording in Dutton's speech as he was basically making his way to the House of Reps to make that speech.
Just
do we need this word? Do we need that word? And apparently, some of these, and they had various policies which they had prepped, they had researched, and what would happen is it would go to Dutton's office.
And he would just make a captain's call and change stuff.
Captain's call and change stuff. Not necessarily delete the policy, but rather than making it sort of, a very specific policy about defense spending in particular areas, we're just going to make it 2% or whatever it is, 2 or 3%
we're going to make it a percentage
GDP.
of GDP, just keep it nice and simple. And apparently that was Gina Reinhardt's idea. And Peter Dutton's like, yes, please. Yes, yummy.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever you say, mummy, Gina.
Well, that's another thing is, the Gina influence is very clear through this article as well. So,
we're very fortunate here that our insane right-wing billionaires here in Australia are also fucking morons. We just have very inept right-wing billionaires. They're not effective right-wing billionaires. You know, we've got Clive Palmer, we've got Gina Reinhardt, we've got Rupert Murdoch. Like, the insane right-wing billionaires that we do have are also just like incredibly fucking inept at what it is they do, which I think makes us pretty lucky as a country.
Here's a series of quotes that I love, and this is from a coalition insider who has fallen out.
Inside could mean anything.
Anyway, so the quote is, "How the fuck do you go into an election without having this shit sorted out?" said one insider who has since fallen out with the coalition and now regards politics as a waste of time. "The old John Howard good policy is good politics went out the window and they went on a spendathon," the insider said. "The machine came up with good policy, but it was overridden at the last minute by some 23-year-old. That was the story.
I would take issue with the idea
most of the policy they announced.
I would take issue with the idea that the coalition was previously announcing good policy, but yes, whatever policy was making its way through was certainly going through the Peter Dutton tumble dryer before it came out the other end, and was all the poorer for it. Yeah, like I said, like the costings. I was messaging you guys like Thursday night when the costings document came out. I was going through it.
No, it doesn't stack up.
And I was like, it makes no fucking sense. I'm glad that this didn't come out on Sunday when we were recording or earlier, because we would have spent the whole. There's no point going through it now because they got thumped. But like, it was a policy document that was just needlessly cruel and just didn't make any sense. Like the things that they were claiming versus what was in the costings did not stack up, and they were like talking about repealing a tax cut that Labor had put through earlier this year. And they just did. It's like they were trying to lose. It's like the whole thing was like a Russian psyop to get people to vote for Labor. Like the whole thing. It's like it was the producers. They were trying to lose.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Like, is it insider? Not insider trading. It's a
Manchurian
gambling. But yeah, and so obviously now that the election's happened, and the Liberals are looking at the coalition's looking at about 40 seats,
they
which
could put them all in a minibus.
Members as well. They could put them all in a minibus. And then I guess, so a few things have happened. So Labor's now trying to pick its cabinet. And it's interesting because you keep thinking that, the days where Labor were factionalized,
no more factions, total unity over here in Labor.
Meanwhile, Gillard Rudd is like an old thing of the past.
Mark Dreyfus, is that you? He's getting stabbed.
So they are dumping, Mark Dreyfus and Ed Husic simply because certain factions of the Labor Party want their guy in, or woman, in, and the two characters didn't have enough backers in the Labor caucus to hold their positions.
I'd be curious to hear. Like, I don't think Mark Dreyfus did a bad job.
In
Attorney General. Like, I thought he was doing a fine job. Anytime he's not the most exciting speaker to witness. Certainly, he's dreary Dreyfus. But the man seemed like he was competent. He was doing a good job. I'd love to know the behind the scenes story of why exactly he got knifed and who he pissed off and what happened there.
It sounds like, it's not necessarily performance related. It's just that someone, a various group of, people within the Labor Party, a faction, don't particularly like him. And it's to do with apparently the New South Wales and Victorian right of the Labor Party. So they want their candidates in. There's a whole bunch of new candidates, obviously, as well. And so they're just trying to shuffle the deck so everyone gets a sort of piece of the pie, so to speak. Now, obviously, the caucus will go in. They'll decide sort of who the people are, and then Albanese will effectively get to sort of sign off on that, and then take that to the Governor General. At this stage, Albanese doesn't sound like he's going to make a captain's call and try and save Dreyfus or Husic. In fact, Husic's already told his staff it's game over. Yeah. But it's interesting. Like, you just sort of you remember we hear about all the factionalism in the Liberal Party. But we forget that Labor is traditionally also incredibly factional.
Every party has factions, right? I mean, you look at if that's what a party is to a certain extent. It's just a conglomeration of different factions, right? And that's what politics is like, the triumph of one faction over another and one party over another. It's factions within factions within factions, right?
So that's the big drama with the Labor Party, and it's not even that big a drama, really.
Whenever, it's not that big of a deal. Whenever you go to an election, it's pretty standard to reshuffle your front bench, and to only be getting rid of 2 front benches is actually not that big of a deal. It's
Scott Morrison
surprising.
shuffled his like 6 times.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
These, like 3.
Yeah, it was like a running joke in the in the previous coalition governments that the amount of reshuffles that they would have for no fucking reason whatsoever. I think the reason it's surprising is because, like I said, Mark Dreyfus has always come across as like pretty across his portfolio as Attorney General, like competent, well intentioned, like seems like a genuine guy. Based on what I've seen on his public statements. So yeah, that aspect of it was surprising. It's not like you go, oh yeah, that guy was a prick and they knocked him off. It's like, no, he actually seemed like pretty good at what he was doing. I'm not sure why that happened. But yeah, factionalism. You will be pleased to hear that the Liberal Party has engaged in somewhat of a circular firing squad over the last couple of days. What
are you talking about, George? They've listened. They've learned. They're taking on feedback. They're going to do an inquiry. Let's not preempt the inquiry, George. With the review. Sorry, let's not preempt the review. Let's let the review happen and definitely start shooting from the hip for this shadow cabinet that they're going to have to create in the next couple of days.
Yep. So you might notice that everyone's favorite political climber, Jacinta Price, has decided that she is defected from the country Liberal Party and is joining the Liberal Party and appears to be joining as Angus Taylor, who was former Shadow Treasurer. He's going to be contesting the leadership for the Liberal Party, and she has joined the Liberal Party for the express purpose of being his deputy, and he has welcomed her with open arms on a post on Twitter. Which just more or less proves to me that Jacinta Price has no morals whatsoever. She's literally just a social climber. Like, she has no ideology, no principles, no loyalty. She will say and do whatever she needs to do in order to climb the ladder and get additional power. Like, she is one of the more revolting figures in Australian national politics at the moment. I had to cut out a lot of what I said about her on election night. Didn't make it to the final edit because it was pretty salty. I like her.
It is, and it's
calling
pretty.
The election into doubt, saying, "Oh, you got to send an investigative ABC journalist out to the ballot boxes in Alice Springs and see what." Like, to know that the harm that the big lie has caused over in the United States, to be compared to Trump and say that comparison is a smear by the media and completely unfavorable, and then to turn around and do a Trump style big lie about the election that you just got thumped in, like that was just so many levels of gross. And then the National Party and the Country Liberal Party have done their best to really elevate her as a voice. David Littleproud in this article talks about accommodations that they made for her to sort of elevate her to their sort of shadow front bench for creating an additional position just for her. And then she's just gone, yeah, thanks very much. See you later. I'm going to go hang out with Angus Taylor and get some real power. Like, the whole thing is just so she's so gross, man. I hate her so much.
It is interesting because she's a member of the Country Liberal Party. And what that means is, so in the Northern Territory, there isn't a Nationals and a Liberals. There's a Country Liberal Party.
Yeah.
So when, in previous parliaments, she, as a member of the Country Liberal Party, because they're part of the coalition, sat with the Nationals. So in this case here, in terms of the cabinet and the way you would go to your party room in federal Parliament, she's no longer going to sit with the Nationals. She's going to sit with the Liberals, which is what this is.
Now, they're part of a coalition, right? So it's meant to be like all hunky-dory, but like obviously the Nationals would feel like it's quite a knife in the back, right? To say that we've advanced you through our party and then you're just going to go hang out with the other guys.
I thought Littleproud's comments were incredibly restrained.
I thought they were quite telling.
Yeah. I think he could have said more things, to be honest.
Well, sure. But I mean, there's no point now, especially since she's probably going to be deputy leader of the fucking party. But yeah, he said, quote, this is the part I thought it was delightfully understated from David Littleproud. Quote, I appreciate Senator Nampa Price has ambition that extends beyond the possibilities of the Nationals, and I wish her well. Yeah, he's just like, she's ambitious and she doesn't give a fuck about anyone except herself, right?
It'll be interesting because obviously, so this gets back to the key race here with the Liberal Party is that who's going to take the Liberal leadership position. So we've mentioned Angus Taylor is standing. Susan Ley is the other contender. Dan Tehan had a little bob.
Dan
had a little go.
A distant third, yeah.
And people went, No, Dan. Sit back down.
Everyone needs a bronze. Everyone needs a bronze medal. No, Dan. No, we don't.
No. Sit back down, Dan.
Sit down. No one cares, Dan. It seems like
we're talking about this.
It's down to Angus Taylor and Susan Ley. Now, fun fact: I learned that Susan Ley is spelled Sussan, rather than the conventional way of spelling Susan. Did you know that this is because in her 20s, she had an ardent belief in numerology, and that an extra S was like somehow more numbers and therefore better for her. I don't know, for her feng shui. I don't fucking know. So that gives you an indication of the caliber of the leadership that the Liberal Party's putting forward there. It's definitely not a bold new direction. It's just a lot of dummies. The same dummies that were in the front bench last time. Angus Taylor was the treasurer who put forward all these dumb, bad, terrible costings that we just talked about. And they're like, even Jim Chalmers on election night was like,
I think he had a real strong go at him.
Oh, because he figured that the next person in charge is probably going to be Angus Taylor, and we've won. Yeah. So I'm on TV. Let's get a chance to stick the boot in. And he said a lot of the loss for what the Liberal Party's just been through should be put at the feet of Angus Taylor, because he's the treasurer, the shadow treasurer that's behind all of these dog shit policies that they just put forward uncosted 2 days before the election. And it's true. I mean, who, if not him, who else could be responsible for it? You know, they had this off-budget.
It's either him or Dutton, right?
Yeah. They had this off-budget measure. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds here, but off-budget means it's outside of the regular budget. The government is putting aside money for a thing which is going to return us money later. And so it doesn't need to be included as part of the regular costings because it's going to be revenue positive in the future. And it's kind of a bit of an accounting gimmick. Anyway, this whole nuclear policy, which is, they reckon, going to cost, I don't know, somewhere north of $300 billion, was all pushed into off-budget measures. So they go, we return to surplus in 3 years. So it's like, if you don't count the $300 billion worth of extra spending you're going to do over the next 10 years. But there was no plan to sell the nuclear facilities and get that money back. So it was money that was going out of the budget and never coming back, but just not being counted. And then all the journos are reporting going, they get back to surplus. It's going to be a really big surplus in 3 years. I was like, no, it isn't. Just because you don't count money that goes out the door doesn't make it a surplus.
This is where your ChatGPT executive summary doesn't actually help in terms of writing an article. You've got to read the actual data. But I mean, again, they only released...
pretty good at reading all of that sort of data now and providing analysis. I'm finding it pretty good nowadays.
So yeah, I mean, it's and this is the problem, is that they've been decimated, right?
Smashed.
And everyone's talking about, where does the Liberal Party go to from here? They've got to do some soul searching. They've got to do a review. And
they've searched their soul and they've found nothing there, and so they're going to elect Angus Taylor.
People saying maybe they need to divorce themselves from the Nationals so they can go back to the centre, and the Nationals can do their own thing for a little bit. But the problem is the people that are left in the Liberal Party in the Parliament,
they're all right wingers.
Are the right wingers.
Yeah.
So there's nothing there to moderate them. There's no talent, or very little talent. You've got some senators that are there, which are probably fine, but at the end of the day, a lot of your ministers and obviously your key leadership has to come from the lower house. So,
they're representing seats that are just going weird, hard right, MAGA style kind of dogshit politics.
Yeah,
and which is why
it's a self-reinforcing ecosystem.
Who's a senator, can get on TV and be like, hey, we need to do a review and we need to really seriously consider the future direction of the party and all that sort of stuff, because he's a senator and he can be in the middle, a kind of center-right conservative, and it doesn't matter, right? But the people who are in the lower house, the ones who actually will form government, they're subject to a completely different set of incentives, which are dragging the party way over to the far right. And I don't see them, the people that seem to be...
And they're in their own echo chamber. This is the key thing, right?
Sky News, fucking Murdoch Media echo chamber where they're huffing their own farts all the time.
It's not like... I guess it's one of those things where it's there are those kind of politicians that are like, well, I'm going to listen to my seat and I'm going to listen to my constituents and I'll flip-flop depending on what my constituents say, which is what an independent is meant to do, right? But the thing is, I think because they've been voted back in, even though they've lost the election, these people have been voted back in for that seat. So they see the fact they've been voted back in as an endorsement upon their own personal political views. It's not, I've been voted in because the electorate trusts me to represent them. They've been voted, they see it as, I've been voted in because people like what I have to say. So I'm just going to keep saying it, which is kind of I guess you can argue both from an ethical or democratic sort of point of view. Like, okay, I guess both are true to a certain extent, but the problem is in this case is it's just reinforcing those views that they've already got. And I don't see them, combined with the echo chamber that is the right-wing, news and information cycle. I don't see them listening. Even if they do a review, I don't see them listening, growing and learning because they haven't got the infrastructure around them and to even drag or any other alternative voices to drag them out of it.
Look at who they're putting up for the leadership. That's the indication of where the party thinks things are going. They're all hyper-conservative morons. So there's clearly no incentive structure there to pull them back towards the center, even though that's clearly, from a numbers perspective, if they want to be in government again, that is what
they have to get more center.
Yeah.
They have to get more center. Like, they should have been. They got thumped by the Teals last election. The primary vote collapsed.
Yeah.
They should have seen that and gone, fuck, we need to get more moderate and we need to fight for the center. That's where we're going to win. And they went, nah, we're going to fight for the outer suburbs because and look, not necessarily the worst strategy, but like they just gave up on all those Teal seats.
Yeah.
And then just forgot about the messaging.
It is, they clearly need to change and they clearly don't want to. But I'm here to say, hey, Liberal Party, keep doing you, babe. Don't let the haters tell you what to do. You just do you and keep on this exact same trajectory of losing seats every election,
Never change. Don't let anyone force you
just
to
be who you are. Be yourself.
Just be who you are. Be yourself, yeah. So Matt Canavan's doing that in the National Party. Matt Canavan's going to contest the Nationals leadership against David Littleproud. So Matt Canavan, rub yourself with some coal on your face. Canavan is could be the new Nationals leader. So how's that going to go for their renewables policy? What renewables policy is there?
Was that a rhetorical? Yeah, bad.
Yeah.
Badly.
Yeah.
Is the answer to that question.
Sorry, I had a little burp as well while I said that question. So.
It was cute. So, the Liberals have, as I said, Liberals and Nationals have descended into a full sort of circular firing squad, just a real et tu brute kind of stabby situation.
Stabby.
So we'll see what comes of that. I certainly don't think it's going to strengthen the party in any meaningful way. Like I said, Labor's currently sitting on 92 seats. They stand to pick up, potentially more of the 8 seats, still in doubt. The LNP have currently got 40 seats. They might be able to, fill up a minibus at this stage. I just don't see, because the thing is, when a party loses this bad, it means that for them to win power next election cycle, they would need to win, 26 seats, which is probably not achievable in one election cycle. So you've got Liberal insiders being like, we're now looking like the party is in such a state now where we probably look like, even if we really pick up a lot of seats next time around, we're probably like 2 elections away from being able to be in power again. And
I mean, that's assuming that, there's a lot of assumptions with that. I'm not necessarily sure whether that's how it traditionally breaks down in terms of like, you chip away and then you chip away and you try and get back within a couple of points.
36 seats.
36, yeah.
36, not 26. They would need to pick up 36 seats.
Yeah.
Which is not probably just not achievable in one election cycle, right?
Well, not traditionally. I do wonder though. I wonder whether, given the new politic of the information space that we live in, I wonder whether that adage of like, oh well, you have to chip away at the points and get a swing going back before you can really make any ground. I wonder whether that's as true as it was 30 years ago.
I think there will be a reversion to the mean next election cycle. I think Dutton was a uniquely unpopular, candidate at a uniquely unpopular time. He also, there was the whole thing with tying himself to Trump and Department of Government Efficiency and, Jacinta Price selling, the make Australia great again and all that sort of stuff, which was uniquely unpopular at this particular moment in time. So we probably will see a swing back to the Liberals next election cycle. to some degree, but is it going to be enough? The 36 seats to pick? I just don't see it. Like,
I just think
also, like,
Australian voters aren't as sticky as they used to be. Like they'll vote.
Maybe.
It's not like, oh, I'm a Liberal guy, I have to vote Liberal. I mean, there's always those people. But like, that's the people, that's the primary vote share, right?
Yeah, a lot of the primary vote share is
the
degrading
36
over time. Yeah, and there was a great analysis from the ABC which showed visually how much people are drifting away from the two major parties towards independence. Right, that's a very real dynamic that's happening over the last sort of decade or so. So that all of that is true, but the problem is when you're starting from such a low base as the Liberal Party, there's a real dearth of talent. Voters, volunteers don't want to volunteer for a losing party. Donors don't want to donate. People don't want to run as a candidate for a party that they think is going to be a loser party. Like,
and then you have to get out there and be like to your actual voters and be like, hey, I'm the new Liberal candidate. This is who I am. This is what I stand for.
And then you're not nurturing there's the pipeline of the people who would be leaders who aren't getting elected and coming into bed. Like, it's a real problem for a two-party system when one of the parties, like, it just
collapses.
Sucks shit and collapses. And because it encouraged, and like, obviously, no, I'm not going to be, blowing anyone's mind here when I say we're, both on the left side of the spectrum, and that we're happy that Labor's in power, but like, certainly better than the alternative of Dutton. But like, it's not good for a two-party democracy when that happens, because a one-party supermajority like gets dumb and has scandals, and it creates excesses in the party structure when one party is completely unchallenged. Like, we've seen that to some degree with the Victorian Labor Party, and because the Victorian Liberal Party has just been completely useless on a number of different fronts, and Labor's just stormed through victory after victory after 10 years. Yeah. And what happens? Like, you see a party that's got, really large deficits and things like that. You get scandals, there's issues with unions and things like that. Now, I would argue that they've made a lot of great advances. A lot of the money that they've spent has been CapEx, capital expenditure on big infrastructure projects, and so of course the budget's going to look not good for a while until the fruits of that labor comes through. But there's been a lot of overspend on mega projects. There's been bad projects that you go, was that really costed properly? Like, was that a good project in particular for you guys to embark on? Like, the East-West link and all that, so the modeling has sort of come out after the fact, and people go, is that actually a good idea for us to be spending so much money on? Like, when a party goes
the value for money
unchallenged, bad things happen. Like, bad governance happens. That's why a two-party Westminster system, where the two parties are always at loggerheads, that the system presupposes that you've got two adequate, capable parties contesting and conflicting and sharpening each other for the benefit of the populace. If you've just got one party that's just, kind of laying dormant, kind of, limp in a bathtub somewhere, and the other party's just doing what they want, that's obviously not great for democracy, right?
So yeah, I mean, you're right. It'll be interesting to see, as you said, and I keep talking about this over many years, it's the branch level that bloody counts. We've got to reform branch level politics, which is hilarious because I've never actually been a political member, and maybe I should get my membership.
I've thought about it. What would it be like to actually sort of volunteer, actually participate at the branch level, in my local party politics? It's not something I've ever done. We've obviously commentated and talked on the internet and shared memes and articles and things like that, which has its place. But like in terms of like being on the ground, speaking to people in our communities, it's not something we've ever done. And I'm getting more. Maybe once I've got some more spare time after
hero of the Soviet Revolution after being a dad.
No, but I think there is something to be said for having a positive effect on your community and getting out there and being more engaged. And like, if it's somewhere where you're planning on living for the next 10, 20, 30 years, I see that as a civic, not responsibility, but it's like a civic duty to go and be involved in the local politics at your level, because you're right. That's where all of these things at the branch level, at the local level, feed into state politics, feed into the federal politics. If you have
got
a
terrible
shitty branch system, then it doesn't work. It doesn't flow up in the way that it's supposed to. So it's something I've thought about as well.
The Liberal, and the coalition branch level system will still be there. But the question is, like, do they put more women through? Do they get educated people at the next election, again, who want to actually stand as a Liberal candidate, knowing that Labor has the majority? Is there an incentive to do that?
That was another thing. The Liberal candidate quality this time around was fucking horrendous. There was the guy in, I forget his name, in Benelong, who's like, is connected with like a Chinese Communist Party high roller. And some guy who had like his wife's business was, so dodgy. There was Hamer, the girl in Kooyong, who
she might win yet.
Who's against Monique Ryan. Well, she might, but last I saw it was close. But like
it's
she
close.
had this whole like weird scandal about like saying that she was a renter, but it turns out she was actually, like the beneficiary of a $20 million trust, and she owns two properties that she rents out, one in London. And it's like, she's completely misrepresented. So there were a couple of different candidates in key races as well. That were just like shit candidates from the Liberal side, and the Labor person was just a fucking person, and so they didn't lose. So they really need to just, if they want to be in serious contention next time around or the time after that, they really need to pull up their socks.
Speaking of pulling up their socks, Donald Trump has announced a lot of things in the last few days. Like, there is so much shit happening in the US on a macro, like half daily news cycle. It's not even like a daily news cycle. It's like every 3 hours there's some other insane thing that happens.
I keep sending you guys memes, and like every now and then I'll get a comment back from one of you guys being like, "Wait, is this real, or is this like a thing that happened? Like, explain this. What is happening?"
I went into like 4 meetings, and I come out, and all of a sudden the chat's blown up.
There's
or
just
something.
Like 5 reels sitting there waiting for you.
Yeah. But one of the insane things that he announced recently is it's gonna reopen Alcatraz, George. It's gonna reopen it. It's gonna make it great again. It's something about just the idea of Alcatraz, George. Just
it's beautiful, it's big, it's small, it's strong, it's weak. The man's just like, just word salad, yummy, yummy. The guy is just off his fucking rocker. And apparently they're like, everyone was like, why is Trump talking about opening up Alcatraz again? It's a prison off the coast of San Francisco, this small island. And someone realized that Escape from Alcatraz, the movie, was playing on Florida television the night before. And that must have been where Trump got the idea, is he just happened to catch Escape from Alcatraz on the television, and that's dictating national policy now. To be clear, I've been to Alcatraz.
I did wonder. I was like, I wonder if you watched The Rock with
which is a much better film, I think so.
I was like, surely he's seen something. So yes, I wouldn't surprise me.
So the idea. So I've been to Alcatraz, right? So went to America with my family as a tourist in whatever it was 10, 20 years ago, and went to San Francisco. And one of the places it's like a thing you really got to go and see is Alcatraz, right? And it's a prison that's on an island, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. As far as they know, I don't think anyone's ever escaped from it, because like San Francisco can get pretty cold and frigid. Presumably the bay gets really cold, and it's on an island. It's a prison on an island, makes it hard to escape from, right? The facilities are from like the 1940s though. And so
not earlier.
Well, it's like the last time people were in there was, I don't know, decades and decades ago. I don't know the exact date. And the place is a museum now, and it certainly would not meet like the conditions in Alcatraz would not meet like current standards for how prisoners need to be treated. Like, there's bars on the doors, but like the windows are completely open. There's no ventilation. Like you would freeze. Like it would be an incredibly difficult, unpleasant place to be that would certainly not be up to code. There's places where you can like put your hands through from like one cell into another because the concrete's just crumbling away. So the last prisoner who was held in Alcatraz was transferred out in 1963, and it's been a museum since then. The concrete hasn't been treated in like 100 years. It is a functionally there as like as a tourist attraction. That's the capacity in which I went there. It's like, oh look, this is the cell where Al Capone was in, that sort of thing. Like, and because it's on an island off the coast of San Francisco, it's not a massive facility. like it costs, 3-5 times whatever it would cost to operate just a regular prison on the mainland because everything needs to be ferried out there via boat. So the whole premise is just like complete nonsense. There was an interview I saw on TikTok where this kid was going through one of these tours and he was
That was
talking.
interesting.
You saw that. Did I send that to you? I must have.
You did.
Where it was talking to a guy who works at Alcatraz and being like, so could they? I don't think the guy understood that he was being interviewed for the internet. He thought he was just like talking to some kid. I think it was like, that guy's going to lose his job.
Gave some very, very honest answers.
Very honest appraisals of what he thought about the policy. It's just like, yeah, well, you can do it if you've got infinite money. There's not a functional place anymore. So it's like, yeah, if
you
you
said
spend,
all the pipes are corroded was the other thing.
The pipes
all the plumbing would have
it doesn't
to get
work.
replaced.
You would have to remake Alcatraz from scratch in order to, and for the purposes of what? Like you could build 5 facilities on the mainland for the cost of what it would do to do this. So it's like, why are you doing? Is it just like, and there were contractors there, like presumably at the behest of Donald Trump. Nobody knows, like doing stuff. The whole thing was just incredibly fucking weird. And yeah, obviously,
but it's not the only facility though. You've pointed out in this article.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. So the reason we bring all this up is because something the Trump administration is doing more broadly, and this has kind of opened up this can of worms, and why people are talking about it now is that they're actually opening up a bunch of different ICE facilities all across America, places that had been previously closed because of asbestos or bad conditions or sexual abuse or mold, all across various states of the country. They're reopening and reopening these facilities, presumably for the purposes of enacting this mass deportation agenda. And it's extremely concerning because it sounds like a lot of these places are really unsafe. That's why they were closed down in the first place.
Yeah.
So, for example, quote, California Democrats have also warned that ICE was interested, this is their border enforcement agency, ICE, was interested in reopening the Federal Correctional Institution, FCI, Dublin, a US prison shuttered last year amid scandals surrounding systemic sexual abuse by staff and concerns about mold and asbestos. The Correctional Officers Union has reported that staff were recently forced to do maintenance work at Dublin in hazardous conditions, seemingly, to prepare for a reopening. But ICE and the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which runs Dublin, have not commented on plans. So it sounds like there's a operations underway at like a national level to prepare prisons for what one can only assume is mass unconstitutional deportation of undocumented.
Well, they wouldn't be deporting them. They'd be it's unclear.
Well, you don't know if
they're in these prisons, are they
holding facilities?
Yeah.
Is it a fucking concentration camp? We don't fucking know what they're intending on using these facilities for, but they're certainly not best in class, up to date prison facilities, right? The purpose would be to have people in the most uncomfortable conditions possible for the purposes of deterrence, right? We're going to torture you in order to make sure you self-deport. They're offering $1,000 for people to self-deport themselves out of the country. That's how desperate they're getting. So it really sounds to me like, there was an executive order. I wrote an article about this as well, that Trump signed the other day, which is basically sort of, just to simplify, loosening the constraints on police and police actions and what they're allowed to do and what they can be held liable for. And, organizing free defense for, from these law firms that Trump has blackmailed, saying that they'll give him all these pro bono services if you stop hurting me, daddy, to say you'll get free pro bono legal defense from these top white shoe law firms if you're a policeman that gets caught up in these issues. Like, he's creating an unaccountable police state. You can see the gears in motion. So we got the concentration camps going. We got the, the reforms happening so the police can do whatever the fuck they want. Like, you can see it start to taking shape. It's a fucking Margaret Atwood novel at this point, right? Like,
I think the other thing from that executive order was it was also enabling federal resources to be directed towards state
domestically
and county law enforcement.
Yeah, like tanks and shit, military surplus. And the use of the National Guard and the military domestically in America on the streets is what they're clearly trying to do.
It's a executive order constitutionally, like, they can't just deploy the military.
Yeah, but it's a bit late when the fucking
it has to
M1A1 Abrams tanks are rolling down fucking Pennsylvania Avenue. It's too late.
Local sheriff's department's like, oh, we got some new resources, and it's just a fucking tank.
Yeah, just pulls out a grenade launcher. Funt.
And look, that's been a trend, particularly, all over the world. Police forces have been arming up over the last,
and we saw it in Black Lives
decades.
Matter, these MRAPs and sort of armored vehicles and stuff.
And the US
this is like a very explicit direction to be like, hey, we are turning the police forces of the United States into an unaccountable police state. Like that is the more or less the express purpose of what they're doing, right?
And where this gets concerning is that, like, at the moment they're focusing on, it sounds like, deporting people, and that's where where the focus is, but
without due process. So we have no idea whether they're U.S. citizens or not. There's been cases of like the kid with cancer, a U.S. citizen being deported without medication, without because they just got caught up in this dragnet. There was no due process, no hearings, no nothing. They couldn't get to them in time in order to force an injunction. And so, see you later, U.S. citizen. Like, this is the kind of stuff that we're...
Crazy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy
But a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily... You don't need, necessarily a tank to do that. But where I am worried is that if there... We haven't quite got there yet. But if there is a large protest movement that gets aggressive, or even just happens to exist, all over the country, if it starts to flare up, then does that therefore mean that states can then call in
martial
federal
law
resources to 100%. suppress?
This is the guy last time around who said, "Well, why don't we shoot the protesters in the legs?" And they're like, "Sir, we can't do that. That you're going to murder people. that would be a crime."
Yeah,
so
it is kind of one of those things where it's like what's the there's an adage around it, but like it's a slow march towards autocracy, but it's happening quite quickly in reality.
It happens slowly and then all at once.
All at once, yeah. I think that's the analogy I'm looking for. So yeah, it's and then this is just one story in the cavalcade of shit, right? Like,
this is just one little piece
story.
There's 1,000 stories coming out from the administration. There was Kristi Noem getting grilled in front of a senator. There was, the senator basically saying, like, you've completely run through your budget for the year. It's May. Like, like, what are you doing? This is unconstitutional. Like, you can't just decide which laws you want to follow and which ones you don't. Like, you have a responsibility to the government. It's just like every day there's just a torrent of, and like you're doing a podcast where we talk about politics, talk about the news. Makes it incredibly difficult to try and choose which stories of things that we're going to that we're actually going to cover, because there's no way you can actually physically cover all of these things in an hour and a half every week. It's just too much shit. And that's part of the muzzle velocity strategy that Bannon was talking about in that infamous interview.
Fire hose of
bullshit is you just keep pumping them full of so much shit that they won't know what thing to grab onto. And it seems like, at least for the first 100 days, it is a strategy that is still very much operative and still very much working with the populace and with the media.
And it's crazy because that's happening, and then on the other side of the world, India and Pakistan are two nuclear armed nations are going at it again.
Yeah, so I remember when Obama was asked in an interview, I forget who it was, what keeps him up late at night. His response was India and Pakistan.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So, for reference, there's a province in India, and it's sort of shared. It's called Kashmir.
Disputed
between. Actually, China has part of it as well.
Sure.
So there's China, India, and Pakistan all sort of share a bit of Kashmir.
Share, I think, characterizes it in a much too generous light. I think.
It's interesting because, Kashmir was its own sort of like province under the British-controlled India or whatever, right? And so when that all sort of ended.
You're talking about partition in the 1940s
partitioning,
when
the
India
partitioning.
was split up between India and Pakistan. Yeah,
correct. So Kashmir, like there was a prince or whatever, like there was a ruler of that province, which everyone expected, because like Kashmir is largely Muslim. Everyone expected them to just go, well, they'll obviously go to Pakistan. But the guy was like, he hesitated and didn't really make a call on it. And then so Pakistani militants started like freaking out and attacking things to like be like, no, we need this. This is ours. It's coming to, and then but then the guy like freaked out and then went to Mountbatten and the British rulers of India at that point and was like, can you come and help me? And then that's when they divvied it up, right? And then there was a war between the two of them, and that's where you get the line of control, which is now.
That's interesting. I didn't know all of that.
And it's a very, very basic summary.
ChatGPT
right?
summary.
Like that is a 5-line summary of a lot of other stuff. It's very complex, and you could argue like, well, why was that ruler in place anyway? Oh, the British set him up because as a buffer against the Sikhs or something back in like 1846. Like there's a whole, like.
Whenever there's a big problem somewhere in Asia or the Middle East or something like that, it's pretty reliably true that you go, hey, so what caused all of this in the first place? And it's some guy probably named Mountbatten or something similar from the island of Britain going, yes, you see this? We'll put a straight line. Everything from here to the horizon is yours, and everything north of that is ours. And that's why Africa is divided up into these very neat straight lines all over Africa, which cut through mountain ranges and rivers and all sorts of tribal boundaries and things like that, is because there was a bunch of colonialists in there at some point that went, yes, well, everything east of the dividing line is yours and everything west is ours. Very good. Pip, pip.
So, since the late 40s, it's obviously... And they've had... over the last 70 years, several conflicts, right, over Kashmir,
famously.
Cross-border fire.
To the extent to which a couple of years ago they were engaging armed, like fist-to-fist, like
that was
combat. Like, remember that story like a year ago?
That was slightly different. So that was like China and India.
Oh, was it China and India?
That was China and India.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not up to date on all of this. I'm sorry.
In like the Himalayas, whatever. But like, like they did have a blow up a couple of years ago. There was a potential war which de-escalated.
Just locals fighting with like whatever, like sticks and weapons they can get their hands on. Like it's just crazy shit.
So if you haven't been paying attention, what happened the other day was on 22nd of April, militants attacked and killed 26 civilians, 25 Indian nationals, 1 Nepali in the town of, I'm going to pronounce this completely wrong, Palangam. I think I've cooked that one. Sorry for anyone who's Indian or Pakistani. That was on the Indian controlled side.
Just say
of
a border town. Like you don't.
A border
town. I don't know why you do this to yourself. Or you make yourself chip commit to a pronunciation that you can't make.
I've got to say the town. I could not be a newsreader. I can't be. What's his name? Anton Edness or from SBS News. Anyway, Indian controlled. It's on Indian controlled Kashmir, right? So then these were militants, quote unquote. Anyway.
But the Indian government was like famously had this like kind of like arm's length relationship with militants, from what I understand. So where it's kind of like,
the Taliban used to just like hang out in Pakistan for fun, like,
right? It's like this kind of like plausible deniability of like, oh, they're not with us, they're not part of the government, but like they just so happen to be doing things that we like them doing, and they're not us. We can't control them, right? Like,
oh no, it wasn't us.
Oh, it wasn't us. Like,
oh, they're extremists. For the Indian government,
bloody extremists again.
Indian government was like, okay, well, they're sponsored by the Pakistani government, and Pakistan didn't deny any responsibility either. That was the other thing. They weren't like, oh no, it wasn't us. They were just like, they just sort of stood there and stared at the camera.
Maybe. Have I been a naughty boy and attacked some border territories? Maybe.
And this has been an issue, right, since Modi has been in power.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an issue for decades. But when Modi got into power,
because he's an Indian nationalist,
he's a Hindu nationalist, right?
Yeah.
This is a Muslim territory, majority Muslim territory. He's a Hindu nationalist, and he's basically started saying, "Fuck this shit," and has started rather than just we'll just let this and previously it was just about sort of copying it, just preserve the peace. We'll just, put some economic sanctions on.
Yeah, it'd be like a bit of a tit for tat sort of thing. You attack our thing, we'll attack a proportionate response, and then everyone just goes like, let's just calm down. Or you're saying it's like India would
previously
just cop it,
India would cop it, and they would just do sort of soft diplomacy around the edges to do it. So since Modi's gotten power, now it is tit for tat. Gloves are off. You attack us, doesn't matter whether it's the Pakistanis or whether it's militants or whoever. We're going to hit you back. And so that's what's happened in this instance, right? So this happened on the 22nd April. India was like, we're going to respond, and they did. And they started bombing various things in Pakistan. So
which they said were terrorist camps and military sites, but it's like, as always with aerial bombing, it's kind of like when the only thing left after they've bombed is a smoking crater, it's kind of hard to prove what was there beforehand, right? So it's like
Pakistan
a child has been killed, like all this sort of stuff, right?
But Pakistan is now has said, well, you've just killed a bunch of civilians, so we're going to hit you back. And now for the last week,
territory, right?
For the last week now, and I've sort of lost track almost of like who shot first and who's like they've just been shooting at each other.
Yeah.
So there've been Indian planes have been shot down. Apparently, some Pakistani planes have been shot down. There've been missiles launched. There's been shelling across the line of control.
And I was listening to a thing which was talking about how. Like the five, I think it was like 5 was the number I saw. Indian planes have been reportedly shot down, which is actually like a very good chunk of India's like aerial capacity. They can't be losing that many planes this frequently based on how quickly how many they have and how quickly they can replace them. Right?
You wouldn't want to be doing that every single airstrike, right? So that would be. Keep in mind as well that that's Pakistan saying that. India has kept played mum on that one.
Yeah.
Which makes you wonder whether or not, maybe they did do it. But the point being is this hasn't de-escalated yet. So normally what you see is there'll be an attack, someone else will shoot back, maybe a bit of shelling, and then it'll stop. But it's for the last week, they've just been going at it.
Right.
Now, I don't know how this de-escalates.
Everyone's just lost their fucking mind since COVID. Since COVID, everyone's, people are grumpier on the roads. Everyone's just fucking gloves off all the time.
Yeah.
Anywhere, any place, let's fucking go. Fucking arc up, bro. That really seems to be the dividing line is like before COVID, I think everyone, I don't know if it's just that people were a little more patient.
Well,
a little more, but like it's since then, it seems like everyone's just like, okay, fucking gloves off. Let's go, bro. Let's start World War III. Let's do it today.
Politically, it's interesting because in Pakistan, Pakistan of the last 15 years has been really tumultuous in terms of its like, who's in charge, what's his name? The former cricketer, like he's in jail now. Bhutto was Bhutto. She got shot. She like 15 years ago. Meanwhile, you got politically, the government there wants to be decisive, right? Because they want to probably have. Let's whip up the nationalism so we can. They've got a motive to be strong on defense, and Modi is the same. Modi's shtick is I'm a nationalist. Let's go at it. So both sides don't really have.
And there's no off-ramp. There's no incentive for them to come to a diplomatic solution because they're both.
Well, there is, but it's less. There's less there than what it would be otherwise, right?
And they're both reportedly nuclear armed powers. So this is why Obama was concerned about the region, shall we say?
Yeah. So everyone's calling for restraint, but whether or not we get there, I don't know. So they've been shooting at each other for now over a week, and I don't quite know how you get off this, how you de-escalate.
The thing
maybe
is,
you just peters out. I don't know, but
the thing
it's not great.
People are online freaking out. Oh, it's World War III started today and all this sort of stuff, and like I think that's probably not the case. But
no.
But if either of these countries decides to use a nuclear bomb on a populated city, like I don't think it's going to affect us here in Australia. We'll be fine. But it would also be the biggest like human-caused humanitarian disaster since like the Second World War. Yeah, or Chernobyl or something like that. Like it would be a devastating loss of life. This is a region that is incredibly populated, right? There's a dense amount of people in both India and Pakistan. if a nuclear bomb goes off in any major city in either of those two countries, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people having their lives ended or ruined, right?
And
so
that would just mean that like
high,
if
right?
Yeah, and you've got like, and they're not chill countries. Like we're talking like holy war kind of. Like if Pakistan got hit,
I wouldn't describe Pakistan as generally chill.
the entire Middle East would be like we fucking jihad now. Like
it wouldn't be great.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it could be very bad. So watch that one. Hopefully though we'll still get our cheap products from India. Woo.
For
trade
globalism.
Will continue.
Woo,
for
liberalism. Woo. It's so funny.
Or you won't
India,
if there's a major war.
India is meant to be. So a lot of countries, since Donald Trump has announced his tariff and trade wars, a lot of countries have been trying to sort of court India as a way of potentially getting around this kind of like whole manufacturing things in China situation. Like, for example, Apple is trying to move several significant parts of their iPhone supply chain for manufacture in India as opposed to China. Not going to bring them back to the United States. That's crazy. But they might move them to India and away from China. Now, if this kind of political instability persists, obviously that's not going to happen, right? So there's a lot of different things moving, sort of from a macroeconomic perspective as well, that are kind of relying on India as a potential hedge for China. And if this kicks off in a meaningful way, I think that's going to call
100%.
all of that into question, right?
So when we say that, it'll be fine, we don't have to worry about it, we absolutely do have to worry about it.
I mean, we're going to worry about everything. If we actually worried to the extent that we needed to worry about all of the things we should be worrying about in global politics, we would be having panic attacks all the time, right? Like at a certain point, you just need to take a Xanax and chill out, right?
Not like Spain and Portugal did though a week ago, because they chilled out and all the power went off.
Too much chilling out.
Real. Yeah. Too much chilling out. Actually, well, to be true, to be fair, we don't actually know what really caused this blackout, but you'd be like, why are you guys talking about a blackout? Like, why is that? That's not
so boring. We talked about potential World War III a second ago. Why are you talking about a blackout in Portugal?
But it wasn't just like a blackout. It was like the whole country's electricity turned off.
Yeah.
Two countries, Spain and Portugal.
Blackout.
So Spain's a country of 48 million people. 48 million people were like without power for.
It's not great.
So they didn't get it back to normal operating, methods or system, capacity levels for like 23 hours after the initial thing went down.
And in case you're wondering, food doesn't spoil in the fridge until 24 hours, it's fine. You got to remember that there's like life support systems and hospitals and traffic lights and all of these human
train systems in tunnels.
Yeah, exactly. You were telling me a story about how people, were in a tunnel when the power
had to walk out.
And so they just had to walk out and leave, just kind of like, like the zombie apocalypse has just happened.
Yeah.
As like the opening scenes of like a disaster movie where they, people.
All the lights are out as well.
Yeah.
Everything goes dark.
It'd be terrifying. If you were a person in that situation, it's dark, the lights go out, you're like, in a tunnel or something like that. You would think it was like some, cyber attack or the world's ending or you're being invaded or something like that. That would be incredibly fucking scary. We rely so much on all of our communications infrastructure. All of everything relies on electricity. It's not the sort of thing that's like, oh, I'll just hang out in my cabin in the woods and just wait. I'll head on down to the shops on next Tuesday. It's like, no, everything in the modern economy runs on electricity and or the internet. So it's like if either one of those things is out, everything fucking grinds to a halt.
It was insane.
Yeah.
And it cost them, I think it's like 1.6 billion euros is the first estimate in terms of the damage to their economy, right?
Yeah, I have no doubt.
So it was kind of crazy. So they're like, well, what happened? So basically the grid on I think it's the Iberian Peninsula, if I pronounced that correctly, just
again
turned off.
Just stop taking swings at pronunciations. You don't have to.
Business pronunciations, George. I gotcha. Bang.
I'm not helping you anymore. All right, you're out to dry, my friend. You can figure out your pronunciations by yourself. Go fuck yourself.
But yeah, like the whole grid in that area of the country just like went down, and that then affected the rest of the country. So sort of what happened here, they're sort of trying to piece it
as well,
and other countries,
because all of these grids are kind of interrelated. Like you're saying that France was like, had sort of insight as to
turned
what
theirs
was
off.
happening in Spain,
Yeah.
and they turned theirs off. Which there's all these things about rebalancing loads because a power grid is not a battery system, right? It's not storage. From what I understand from briefly reading Saul Griffiths, is that a grid is essentially it's like a balancing act. So you got the production on one end and you got the demand on the other end, and they more or less need to match each other perfectly at all times in order for the system to work. And so if the demand radically changes because like France says, okay, something fucked is happening over there, we're just going to, we're going to switch to cut things off. That again throws the whole system into additional chaos on top of whatever it is that they're already trying to manage, right?
And so it all happened like within the space of like 5 minutes. So I think they don't quite know exactly sort of what the root cause was, but I get a sense from what analysts have sort of been putting together that it might have been a series of cascading failures.
So we'll do a root cause analysis and see how we met our service level agreements, and we'll come back to you with a report on how we crashed the entire fucking economy for a day.
So minutes before the outage, Spain was running on 60.64 solar photovoltaic generation, 12% wind, and 11.6 nuclear.
It's the fucking renewable energy. This is why we need coal. Matt Canavan emerges.
And so they also had some hydro in there somewhere as well, I think.
Yeah.
But so what sort of started to happen was apparently there was a surge. So solar dropped. From what they can tell, solar dropped very suddenly, and they reckon that's because something in the computer system must have turned off the generation to compensate for elevated loads. But then at the same time, so whatever's happened, there's obviously been an influx at some point where there's been too much power coming in.
Right.
But I think what's happened is, this is my personal take, it's not fact, from what I can read in some of the articles I've seen,
Adam,
it seems
again,
like a bunch of...
You're a white guy on the internet. You can say whatever you want, buddy.
Say whatever I want.
Just claim it.
It seems like a bunch of systems reacted to it at the same time.
Who is this?
So rather than just...
He seems like an expert. He's so well spoken. His pronunciation is so good.
So it's like, yeah, okay. So so in reaction to this unbalanced load, they've turned off some of the solar, they've turned off the nuclear power that the control rods went into all their nuclear plants. France is disconnected from the grid because of whatever they were seeing, and all of a sudden you've actually got, rather than having an overpower situation, which would fry the grid, you've actually got no power, not enough power going in at all, which causes a blackout. So the problem is that one part of the grid went out, and then that affected everything else.
And then all the other systems, it was a cascading failure. It almost reminds me of like a bank run or something like that, where it's like one part of the system fails in one place, and then all the other parts of the system freak out in response to that, which just compounds the problem and makes it worse.
And so everything turned off, and then they were like, well, fuck, we've now got to spin everything back up again. So France stepped back in, they reconnected, Morocco reconnected, trying to get some power back into the grid. But the problem was, because they turned everything off and powered everything down, they then couldn't just turn it all back on at once. They had to gradually do it over the course of a few hours. So like, we have to, like, you can't just turn a nuclear reactor off and then put it back on again. You've got to like
have you tried turning it off and on again?
Yeah, same thing for gas. Even all these sort of systems that we say, oh well, you can vary the supply. They're not instantaneous. You can't go from 0 to 100. You've got to like turn it up gradually.
Have you unplugged it from the outlet and left it for 30 seconds?
Have you? No, I did not.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, and so they gradually turned everything back on over the course of sort of 24 hours. But it's kind of fascinating. I've never seen an entire country's... It's the entire country. I've never seen an entire country's just like... Two countries. I keep thinking it's just Spain. Yeah, it was Portugal as well. I've never seen that just happen on that scale before.
It's pretty wild. And like I said, I was kind of half joking earlier, making fun of the people that say, oh, it's because of renewables. Like certainly... renewables are not as reliable as some other kind of like baseload power type, inputs like, coal or gas and things like that, where you can control the amount that you're producing at any one time based on the demand. But like clearly this, to my mind, or based on what we've looked at here, is really a problem with how the grid has been managed. And that's a much larger problem, like whether renewables are the input or whether it's baseload power or whether it's any other kind of input. Like you still need to have a resilient grid with lots of protections and controls, and maybe things like, battery storage and things like that to firm up all of these different services. So when things happen, you can, when you've got too much power, you can store it in the batteries. When you haven't got enough power, you can draw from the batteries. Like, it's the electricity grid, the demand that is going to be placed on the grid based on the growth in requirements for electricity means that, all countries, Australia, America, every country is going to have to spend significant resources over the next 10, 20, 30 years building up their grids, regardless of what happens with renewable electricity. So that's the work that needs to be that's the policy that needs to be talked about now, is like, how do we fix up the grid to make sure that it's resilient going into the future? Because, we're only going to be relying more and more on electricity as time goes on, like getting off fossil fuels. Obviously that's one aspect of it. The increasing electrification of regular households. We just demand much more electricity than we used to, more screens, our heating, our cooling is electric now, our stovetops increasingly are electric, our water heating is increasingly electric. We've got 5 screens, we've got live streams, we've got computers, we've got, Internet of Things, every device, your fucking fridge now talks to your router, which so and the increasing demand on the electrical grid from AI is also going to be a thing, like enormous power draw requirements for
data centers
and artificial intelligence, which is why like Microsoft is restarting 3 Mile Island, the nuclear facility, so they can have a dedicated source of, baseload electric clean energy power. Like,
and to be clear, you do need baseload power, and like, but the thing is, Spain's got that. They've got nuclear, they've got hydro.
Right, they're doing everything right. I think, as far as I
they've
can
actually
tell.
got a fairly, and they've got gas as well. They've actually got a fairly diversified, grid
system.
The issue is like, well, they lost 60% of their power in like a minute. Everything, a bunch of stuff disconnected. So you've got to work out
like a flash crash, almost like a Wall Street. All these algorithmic traders that are just kind of doing things based on algorithms, and then like something crosses some threshold, and then everyone starts selling, and then it turns into a market panic, right?
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like.
It's basically no one's exactly sure what happened yet, and if they are, they're not saying. So there is a possibility that maybe there was some foreign influence or something.
Cyber attack or something.
I think
could be.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it just shows that if we are if there's a lot of variables, we're going to have to rely on computers, algorithms, to manage a lot of that. And so we need to make sure that those computers and algorithms, the systems that are in place to manage it are
secure and firmed up and
up to scratch,
backed up with redundancies and all that sort of stuff. But it's not. But it's going to be, that is a problem regardless of whether coal or anything else is the input.
Yeah, correct.
Right? But
correct.
this is like this is a problem of complexity that we just have in the 21st century. And
we just have so much demand. It's like
it's something that we just didn't have to deal with in the 20th century to the same extent. But things are changing a lot, and so we just need to, like, we and other countries need to have a better plan to deal with. Which is Saul Griffith's book, Rewiring Australia, I think is what it's called. Rewiring. I skimmed it, haven't read it. Is all about essentially how do we deal with this challenge of modernizing and upgrading the grid. It's enormously expensive,
and Spain's
project,
like
it's very complex.
The size of New South Wales or whatever, right? Like Australia's huge.
Yes.
Like the problem in Australia is much more pronounced.
Yeah.
The fact we haven't had blackouts in Australia yet is astounding to me.
Yes, being the operative word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Saul Griffith wrote a book called Rewiring Australia, which goes into some detail about these issues, and I think it's I'll link it in an article about it in the show notes as well.
Thank you. Last article of the day: new Pope, who dis?
It's a new Pope. So Robert Prevost is the new Pope. Obviously, I don't think we talked about it at the time, but Pope what's his name? Pope Francis died recently, and they've held a conclave, which the producers of the 2024 film Conclave were fucking thrilled about. Obviously, it's just popping at the moment. It's number one film on streaming at the moment.
Yeah.
So he passed away, and they hold a conclave, which is where they go and do a papal vote, all the cardinals, and they elect their new pope. It needs to be like a significant majority that choose the new pope. This guy Robert Prevost is new Pope Leo XIV, and he's an American pope from Chicago. Hey, the bears, it's a me, the fucking pope.
Except they're selling it as he's a Peruvian from the Americas, because he spent a large amount of time in Peru. He was a bishop there and is done a lot of missionary work. He has Peruvian nationality as well. Speaks about 3 or 4 different languages. So they see him as someone who's, he's not from necessarily a traditional block, although we're not sure necessarily how he will come down on the whole like LGBTQI plus.
Probably not great because he's the fucking Catholic Pope. He's not going to be like, fucking, it's
let's go, let's start fucking, let's go.
It's queer night down at the Vatican. I don't think so. But certainly it seems to be from what I understand, Pope Francis really, obviously the growth areas for the Catholic Church are in places like South America, places like Africa, Asia. Apparently Pope Francis brought in a lot of cardinals from those regions as a way of stacking the courts, basically stacking the deck in terms of a more sort of progressive sort of agenda going forward. And he seems to be the kind of like outgrowth of all of that.
Yeah.
But certainly by no means is he, down at Puffdorf on a on a Saturday
Interesting
night.
though.
Right? Like he's still a Catholic Pope, right? So it's going to be fairly conservative.
Interesting choice though, given the stuff that's happening in the United States, right? So he's very much about the cause for the immigrant, continuing Pope Francis's legacy, right? Of like, calling out, for love and tolerance, all that kind of stuff within that sort of the migrant communities and being kind to each other. And
watch out, or you're going to get another visit from JD Vance. Watch out.
And this is the thing, is like, well, is this selection partly also a reaction to the US, given he's American? He's also, American by birth, and I'm assuming he's still an American citizen. Is this a reaction to that?
Possibly. I mean, I also heard a report from the Daily which went into some detail about the sort of financial situation. And in recent years under Pope Francis, the Americans, who obviously that's where a lot of the money comes from, were feeling kind of increasingly isolated under the sort of Pope Francis regime. And so some people think that it really is just a case of like getting some big mega donors back into the Catholic Church.
Back into the church.
Because they were donating, but they were donating to local American Catholic stuff rather than donating directly into the Vatican for like worldwide HQ Catholic stuff. So it could be seen as like let's get the money taps turned back on from the Americas sort of thing. It could be like a progressive, kind of like, sort of moderate progressive agenda type thing. It could be, it could be a number of different things as to why this guy's been chosen as opposed to others. But it definitely doesn't seem like the worst. Sort of is no Ratzinger, former Hitler youth sort of like the Catholic Pope has elected, the Catholic Church has elected much worse popes in its history. So
yes.
I will continue, obviously, of course, being as atheist as I was yesterday. This affects me not at all. The tagline of New Pope Who Dis was just irresistible. So I suppose we've included it as a story. Does this, I know your family's like more sort of into the religious stuff. Does this affect you guys at all? Or?
Not really. I mean, my dad's, religious. Wouldn't say they're hardcore Catholics or by any measure. But, I think my dad would approve without sort of actually asking him directly.
Let's put some words in his mouth, but go for it.
But it is something that, like, you go, from when I used to go to mass, when I was at school and otherwise, it is something that they talk about, in their prayers. They talk about, the Pope and, various directions and, the things that the Pope talks about flow down.
Papal edicts and things.
Yeah, the things that the Pope talks about do flow down to the local parish level. So it is depending on who you pick as the Pope, will have consequences for local parish life. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, how the growth is coming from Africa and Asia and those sorts of places. Conversely, it's not coming from developed Western countries as well.
It's failing.
So there's a lot of areas where secularism, and you could obviously, if you're religious, you would see this as a bad thing. If you're a secular humanist like I am, you probably see it as a pretty good thing. But that, the amount of people identifying as no religion or as agnostic or as atheist is increasing in a lot of Western developed countries, and increasingly an institution like the Roman Catholic Church is seen as increasingly irrelevant, right? So if they're losing those people elsewhere, they need to make those gains in those other areas that we mentioned. So and who is at the head of the church obviously has a meaningful impact on that, right?
And I think, like, if the Catholic Church wanted to go big or go home, they could be an important foil for things like what's happening in the United States, right? Like, they could be part of the resistance potentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the reason that there hasn't been an American Pope up until this point is that the Catholic Church did not want, like, America has been such a robust hegemon since the end of the Second World War that they didn't want to give them another power base, essentially, by electing an American Pope. It was kind of seen as like having European popes was like a hedge against American hegemony. So it's interesting that now that they think, maybe we can get an American Pope, maybe we can have some influence over in the Americas. There's a lot of different factors. Like the politics of it is quite interesting.
Oh, it's interesting. Fascinating. Yeah.
As someone who's like not religious whatsoever, I still find it quite interesting. And Stanley Tucci in a Cardinals robe, just perfect. Unmissable. On that note, speaking of unmissable, we have been, we are, and we always will be the unmissable Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and mother flippin' TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Substack at George Tsipos.
And you can't follow me and Tom because we're recluses now online. But you can follow me down to my local parish where I'll be lighting a candle and saying a few prayers.
I was worried about where that sentence was going. Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We will see you next week.
Just go down to your local church and just sit down. You know all those movies where they're just like people just walk into churches and just sit down?
And have like dramatic monologues with someone sitting like 2 pews behind them. Sort of thing.
Yeah. Like it's actually kind of like churches aren't always just like open. You can't just like walk into a church.
Operating hours, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Also, incidentally, American Pope sounds like a fucking great crime show that would last for 2 seasons 100%. On Showtime and then get cancelled because it's too expensive to film. Like I would absolutely watch, like, what's that actor's name from Boardwalk Empire? How do you do something?
No, fucking Reservoir Dogs.
Yes.
It's gone. No,
oh my god. What is this guy's name? Boardwalk Empire.
Armageddon.
Steve Buscemi.
Yes, thank you.
I could absolutely see Steve Buscemi as the American Pope for 2 seasons on Showtime. I would watch the shit out of that. Are you fucking kidding me? Get Terrence Winter in there to direct. Get some of the Sopranos people in. Perfect. Tim Van Patten. Love it.
Or it could be produced by Paramount and run in 25-minute episodes and go for 6 seasons.
And it gets Sylvester Stallone in, and it's just like a mediocre and terrible, but runs for 8 seasons for some fucking reason. Just like a Tyler Sheridan.
And like by the end of it, he's not even the Pope. And it's like, why is it still called?
I don't even understand. Pope? Yeah, we're like focused on like the cousin now or something. The cousin of the Pope. I don't even fucking get it. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
Copyright that. We should throw some copyrights and some.
No, I'll edit that out. I'm keeping that. That's mine.
Yeah. Okay.